I found the diagram on a Tuesday morning, folded inside my clean linen, not tucked in a pocket or left on the windowsill. Inside the fold, the way you'd press a letter into an envelope, flat and deliberate. I almost threw it away with the wrapping. It was hand-drawn on a torn piece of paper, a curve that I eventually understood was the river. Tick marks at intervals along both banks, numbers beside each one, depth soundings, current velocity estimates, written in pencil with no label, no name. I looked at it for a long time before I understood what it was. Then I looked at the date in the corner, small and precise, 2 days before the storm. She had already mapped the flood before it happened. I'll back up. Because that morning I didn't know what I was holding, and at that point, I still thought of her as the woman who changed the bed linens. That's on me. That's the part I carry. I came to FOB Carlin Rehabilitation Annex in the second week of August, with a shrapnel wound in my left leg, and a disposition report that used the phrase, non-ambulatory, 60 days. The annex was a converted supply building about 400 meters from the river, the Cala River, wide and brown and unremarkable in summer, the kind of river nobody thinks about until they have to. The ground floor ward was 9 beds. I had the first room upstairs, one of 4 walking patients who could handle the steps. The rest of the ground floor beds were occupied by men who could not. She was already there when I arrived. I didn't register her at first, the way you register staff. I registered her the way you register furniture. She was present, useful, background. She pushed the linen cart from room to room. She brought the trays. She changed dressings when the corpsmen were stretched. She did it without fuss, without conversation beyond what was needed, with clean hands and a methodical economy of movement that I noticed only because I was bored and watching everything. Her name was on the duty roster as a civilian support contractor. That was all I knew. Colonel Pruitt ran the annex, a medical administrator, not a line officer, a man who had the particular confidence of someone who had never been surprised. He arrived on intake day the week before mine, when she was brought on by the facility director as a replacement for a departing contractor. I heard the intake from the upstairs hallway because my room door was open, and the conversation was conducted at volume. She had a sealed envelope with her, a qualification packet, thick enough that I could hear it land when she set it on the colonel's desk. She asked him to log it in her file. He looked at it the way he looked at supply requisitions that came in late. He picked it up, weighed it in his hand, set it back down. Records office handles supplemental file submissions, he said. Talk to Specialist Garth. He slid it back across the desk. You're on ward laundry and patient transport. Carts in the storage room off the main hall. He turned back to his paperwork before she had left the room. 19 people heard that. 9 patients, 6 staff, 4 walking wounded upstairs, including me. She picked up the envelope without comment. She found the storage room. She pulled the linen cart out and started down the main hall at the same quiet pace she used for everything. I watched that from the top of the stairs and thought nothing of it. I thought, contractor, records mix-up, happens all the time. I went back to my room. That was the shape of the next 9 days. She worked. The ward worked. The colonel came through twice daily, clipped and efficient. Nobody asked her name beyond what was on the roster. Nobody read the envelope, which I later learned sat on Garth's desk in the records alcove, under a binder, untouched. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known from the top of the stairs, was what she was doing between shifts. She was walking the river. Not in any way that drew attention. Early morning, she walked the near bank for about an hour before the ward came alive. The facility director had given her use of a small room in the annex's rear section, which backed onto a footpath that ran down to the bank. She took that path every morning. Nobody tracked it because nobody was tracking her. She was the laundress. She was the woman with the cart. She was reading the water the way a professional reads water. Bank slope, scour depth, current profile at the bend, the way the flood markers on the upstream pier had aged and faded. She was reading it and writing it down. 2 days before the storm, she folded the result into a piece of paper and put it in my linen. I don't know why she chose mine. Maybe because mine was the first stack. Maybe because she had nowhere better to put it. Maybe because she understood that someone upstairs would need to know, and I was the one most likely to find it before the water did. The storm hit on a Thursday evening, not a surprise on the calendar. The forecast had been bad for 4 days, but the speed of the river's rise was beyond what anyone had projected. By 2100 hours, the ground floor ward had 8 inches of water in it. By 2130, it had 2 feet. Colonel Pruitt made the correct institutional decision. He ordered the upper floor sealed and called for the district emergency response team. He was on the phone with them when he made that call, standing at the top of the stairs with a flashlight and a radio, doing exactly what the protocol said to do. He was not a coward. He was a man who trusted systems and waited for them to arrive. The district team was 90 minutes out. The 9 men in the ground floor ward were immobile. I was at the top of the stairs, standing on my good leg with one hand on the rail, watching the water move in the hallway below. And she walked past me going the other direction, down, into it, carrying a rope coil over one shoulder and a pair of dry bags clipped to her belt. She didn't look up. She didn't ask permission. She had already done the calculation. The rope she'd brought was from the storage room, the same room with the linen cart. Rigging line, 20 meters, used for securing equipment loads. She tied one end around the stairwell post at the base of the steps, the only fixed structure in the main hall still above water at that point, and she waded out toward the first room. I watched her work for 3 hours and 14 minutes. I counted, because there was nothing else I could do with my hands and my leg, and my uselessness, and because watching her was the only thing happening that made sense. Every time she disappeared into the dark water of the main hall, the only evidence she was still moving was the rope, taut and angled, pulling against the stairwell post with a slow, steady rhythm. Every time she came back the same way, calm, methodical, the next patient, already the only thing in her attention. She didn't rush. That was the thing I remember most clearly. She moved at exactly the pace the water allowed, no faster, never fighting the current when she could angle through it. She read the floor she couldn't see by the resistance on her shins and adjusted her angle without breaking stride. The way someone does who has read invisible terrain before and knows that the water will tell you everything if you stop arguing with it. First patient, Ward, a field artillery sergeant with both legs in external fixators. She rigged the dry bag harness around his chest, explained what she was doing in a flat and unhurried voice, and walked him to the stairwell rope hand over hand, steadying against the current pull by leaning into it at an angle I later understood was calculated from the tick marks on that paper. She passed Ward to me at the base of the steps. I pulled him up. She went back. Ward after ward, patient after patient. She talked to each one before she moved them. She told them where to put their weight, how to breathe, what her arm would do. 3 of the 9 were unconscious. She rigged each one differently, based on the weight and the fixator placement and the current velocity, which was still rising through the second hour. By the time she pulled the last man, Corpsman Declan Holt, who'd broken both wrists 3 weeks prior and couldn't grip anything, the water in the main hall was chest deep on her, and she was using the rope as an anchor, working hand over hand back to the stairwell, with Holt's harness clipped to her belt. She brought him to the stairs. She handed him up to me. She climbed out of the water and sat on the 3rd step for 45 seconds, breathing with her hands flat on her knees. Then she went back to check the rooms. 9 immobile patients. 2 orderlies who had been helping evacuate non-essential equipment and got caught in the north wing when the current shifted, both extracted in the second hour. 11 people. She walked back to check the rooms, because she had counted 11, and she wanted to confirm the count. And that is the kind of thing you do when you were trained to do it. Colonel Pruitt was still on the radio when she climbed the last step. The district team arrived 22 minutes later. I was sitting at the top of the stairs holding Holt's arm and watching her wring water from her sleeve, still not knowing what I was looking at. The inquiry letter arrived 11 days later. A congressional aide's office, requesting confirmation of service records in connection with a decoration review, a sealed citation that had been in transit between commands for 8 years and had never been formally presented. The aide needed a duty address. The facility director routed it to the colonel. He read it at his desk on a Saturday morning. I know, because his office window faced the upper ward hallway, and I was doing my physical therapy laps past that window at 07:30, and I saw his face when he got to the second page. He did not call anyone. He sat there for a long time with the letter on his desk and his hands flat on either side of it, very still, the way a man sits when he is reckoning with the precise weight of a mistake. The citation covered 3 confirmed combat river crossing operations in 2 theaters. the third of which, in the second theater, involved clearing a bridge approach of 6 unexploded ordnance devices while under intermittent fire, alone, over 4 hours and 40 minutes, to allow a medical convoy to cross. A master diver qualification logged in 1997. A combat demolition swimming sub-certification that fewer than 40 personnel in the branch had ever held. The call sign bestowed by the first crossing team carried forward through the next 2. Still depth. The sealed envelope on Garth's desk held a copy of the same file. He walked to the records alcove that afternoon and retrieved it himself. I didn't see what he did with it. I was in physical therapy. But the next morning, at 0540, I was awake early with the leg aching, standing at my window in the gray light before the ward came alive, and I watched Colonel Pruitt come down the main hall corridor below, moving quietly past the closed room doors. He was pushing the linen cart. He did it slowly, the way a man does something he has never done before, and is doing for the first time with full attention to the weight of it. He stopped at each doorway. He took a stack of clean linen from the cart. He set it on the threshold where she would pick it up on her first pass. He did every room on the ground floor. He did every room on the upper hall. He did mine last. He set the stack at the door and stood there for a moment, looking at the floor, and then he pushed the empty cart back to the storage room and latched the door behind him. She came on shift at 0600. She found the linens already at every threshold. She didn't ask about it. She collected them one by one in her usual order, and brought the first stack to the first room, and set it on the end of the bed, and began her work. I watched that from my doorway with the light coming gray through the hall windows, and my hand on the frame, and I did not say anything to her, or to him, because there wasn't anything to say that the morning hadn't already said better. The diagram is in my kit bag. I still have it. Current velocity numbers in pencil, a bend in the river, mapped 2 days before the water came. I carry it the same way I carry the things that correct me, not as a trophy, not as a keepsake, but as a document of the distance between what I assumed and what was actually there, which is a distance I have not finished measuring.